Did you freeze on me? All right. Apparently, we are having technical difficulties here, people.
Yeah, the music was still playing.
Not on
On
my
my end.
end.
The music was still playing.
That's weird. Yeah, stream it was stopped. I'm looking at the feed.
Yeah,
I think
that's
Restream's having some issues. So
that makes sense. It made me sign in again today. Not like I don't do this every stinking week. All right, let's start this off properly. We all wear masks tonight. We wear the mask of fear. I am your host, Johnny, and it is a pleasure to be here with you wherever and whenever you're listening and or watching from. Joining me tonight is only one of my regular co-host colleagues, friends. As you can see, Randy will not be joining us tonight. He's under the weather, so he will he's taking the night off, resting, relaxing, getting back up to fighting strength. Sean, how you doing tonight?
technical difficulties galore over here. I'm ready to punch my computer. So that probably gives you an idea of my current mood set. So feel free to run through the intro stuff here while I try to fix this bullshit.
Lovely, that kind of night. All right, guys, let's kick things off, get things going, jump into the business of the day. As always, we like to start off each segment with a little multiple choice question. So for this one, it's a simple yes or no. Did you enjoy I Know What You Did Last Summer? If you've gone to see it, yes, no, or I haven't seen it yet. Before we get these shows started properly, let's take a minute to thank all of our sponsors over at patreon.com/the mask of
Fucking is us.
fear.
Yep, that's
So
me still
Ryan,
getting mad. Sorry.
well, with Ryan over at Kaulignation, we can get all your NASCAR needs available right here on the YouTube platform. Jason at Backtrack Cinema, the place to go for all of your retro horror needs, wants, loves, enjoyments. And Jesse Storytime Spectacular, where he'll talk about pop culture and just generally whatever he wants. And of course, a special thanks to all of our other patrons who aren't on the sponsor tier. Without you guys, there is no us. If you want to head over to patreon.com/the mask for you can check out all of the available tiers and all of the available bonus content, including but not limited to the first two episodes of The Cult of Thorn. The first two episodes are currently available. The first one focuses on the early treatments for the Halloween series, and the second is part two of that discussion, plus stuff about the Halloween game when it was a single player from Boss Team Games. And the Legacy of Halloween has its first episode out, part one of the making of
To be clear,
Halloween.
it was never a single player. I don't know if that's what's in the notes, but sure as hell shouldn't be. Um, Basically, our content over on Patreon on the Halloween game is based off of information that we were able to gain when Boss Team Games was actively in development of the game. That could still all be current. We're not sure. And more on the Halloween game tonight in a way, but perhaps not in a positive manner, depending on what way you look at it.
And you can also check out all of the wrestling content right now, including our All In review that we recorded last week. All that and so much more available now and coming soon over patreon.com/the mask of fear. All right, guys, let's move to our first proper segment of the evening. Put on your favorite horror villain mask. It's time to talk horror. We'll start with this week's multiple choice segment starter. Have you gone to or do you plan to go see I Know What You Did Last Summer in theaters? Oh, my mouth is drier than the Sahara. All right, let's move into our first topic of this segment. Crystal Lake casting is nearing its conclusion. Crystal Lake has found its young Jason Voorhees. Callum Vincent, who was in Chucky and Long Bright River, which was a 2020 Peacock series, also starring Amanda Seyfried, has joined the cast as Jason. Callum is credited as a recurring guest star. How many episodes that means he'll appear in, we don't know. But he's not alone rounding out the cast. Also joining the cast is I don't know if I'm going to get all these name rights, so apologize if I don't. Nick Cordileone, who was in Warrior, Joy Soprano, who was in Fleischman is in Trouble and Bigfoot Forward, Danielle Koch, who was in Director's Cut, and Phoenix Parnevik, who was in Bel Air and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, have also joined the cast. Uh, we know first names, so we assume that these are the same. Presuming names are same in this as they were in Friday the 13th. Cordileone is going to play Ralph, who we presume to be crazy. Who is presumed to be Crazy Ralph from the first and second movie. Joyce Soprano is Rita. Koch is. Uh, I'm sorry, Parnevik is Barry, who is presumed to be Barry Jackson, who was the first victim in the first film. And Koch is Claudette, which is presumably Claudette Hayes, who was also a camp counselor, who was the second victim in the first film and the girlfriend of Barry. As we get close to wrapping up this cast, what are you thinking? We have photos. These obviously the big one here is young Jason. What do you think? Are you? I don't want to say surprised because we knew he would, you know, obviously be a part of this in some form or fashion. But um, are you surprised it's currently is a recurring thing? Like I kind of personally had expected he'd only be in, you know, maybe the first episode and the last episode. Which I mean, I guess that could be what it ends up as. But is it surprising? Do you like the casting? How do you feel?
I've never seen Chucky, so it's hard for me to comment on the young lad's ability to act. But I think the fact that he is from another horror franchise probably benefits him as long as he's not getting Jake Lloyd treatment. Um, you know, I'm not overly positive or overly negative on it, to be frank. I think that this series is going to, like, there's a lot of people that think this series is just going to be Friday the 13th part 1 again, and it's not. You're going to get before then, and then you're going to get during then. You're going to get a bit of both. And I still say, as long as the series isn't a disaster, this is all leading to the guy in the hockey mask. There's not a conscious effort to make sure that we don't see the guy in the hockey mask. I believe there's an effort to absolutely make sure we get to that point. But until we do, we have a prequel series. The TV series has the rights to do all that stuff. The question is, what kind of foundation and groundwork is about to be laid? I think the obvious thing here would be is once we get to the guy with the hockey mask, whether it's the last episode of season 1, first episode of season 2, the last scene of season 1 even, you're going to see a rollover in the cast. There might be some characters that survived this first era of the show, and we see different people play older versions of those characters, a la, it. But otherwise, like, well, there might be some returning characters outside of Linda Cardellini. I expect the entire cast to roll over, so they just got to hold their own for a season of TV. And if I can point to a show where the cast had to hold their own for the entire series, but different stories each season, is, well, a few members of the cast in American Horror Story that first season were very well known. There was a bigger portion of that cast that wasn't well known at all. and that show hit. So it's all a matter of like your writing material, right? Like how's the show going to hit? Is it just going to be your typical B slasher that's been put into a TV series? Or are we going to get some tangible content here that we're excited to go back to week after week? I'm not saying the thing needs to be Andor. I'm not that much of a lunatic, but I do think there's a chance to, and I know people don't like this word, but like elevate this show a little.
Yeah, I mean, it can't just be sort of your typical, horror schlock, or it's not going to work. It needs to tell a good story. And that's the most important thing is how it's going to introduce some of these characters. Some we are going to be familiar with, and but most that we aren't, and it's going to extrapolate on relationships and interactions and things like that we didn't really get. Like in the first movie, we didn't get those interactions. And it's going to be interesting to get more into that side of things here. Putting the focus more on Pamela, I think, is where you sort of need to for this series, and I'm excited for it. Not having the crutch that is Jason in the hockey mask to lean back on. It's sort of that same problem that a lot of the horror franchises get into. Specifically the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th, where your main antagonist is a character that doesn't speak and can't carry their sort of portion of the dialogue, unlike a Freddy Krueger who can. And you sort of fall into that crutch of just leaning on these characters to just do things, and everyone around them pushing the story forward. And now you sort of have that opposite, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. Yeah, I look forward to seeing this, especially as we get to see more and more of it. Um, like you, I'm in the same boat. I don't really know this guy's, I don't know his body of work other than what it is. I haven't seen either of these series, so I can't really speak to talent, but, putting faces to names, I think, is important. Um, and as we get closer and closer, and we start seeing more and more come out from the set, and eventually we'll start seeing official stuff. It's that it's not just because it's something we'll continue to talk about, but it's something that I am, external of this channel, excited for.
Yeah, I agree. Let's just hope it all goes smoothly. What do we got next? I think I know what's next, but is it this? And if it is, I'm throwing a curveball.
It is.
Okay, so if anybody else wants to share their non-spoiler thoughts of I Know What You Did Last Summer in the chat below, please feel free to do so. Um, I stand by basically everything what our source said last week. If you didn't tune into last week's show, I suggest you go check it out. But the one thing I do want to dive into a little bit tonight for a short period of time is the box office for I Know What You Did Last Summer. And to be fair, there's a good reason why I want to do it. And I can't just come out and say what it is because we're not in spoiler territory here this evening. And if I did, well, we would be in spoiler territory right now. Um, Look, this movie is a quality movie worth seeing, where thought and care was put into it. And I think a group of people that create content in the same space we do had way overblown expectations for this thing and thought it was going to be the second coming of something. And it's just not the case. Um, but what it is a movie that definitely has lots of balls, especially in the last act. Um, Now, whether or not it can have a sequel, narratively speaking, it should, and I hope that's me not tipping my hat too much. But financially speaking, it's not looking great at the moment. So its 4 official days of earning have brought in 14 million domestically and 25 million worldwide. This movie probably needs to make somewhere in the 70 to 80 million dollar range to be profitable. And it's only at 25 now. The odds of it hitting 70 or 80 are not good. Now, they may feel there's still some money to be made in a sequel if they lower the costs of production even more, and lend, you know, lean over into story creativity. But from my perspective, I think they thought this was going to have a much bigger opening weekend. And I didn't think it was going to be much bigger, but I thought worldwide it would have got to mid 30s, maybe 40. And like it's only sitting at 25 after 4 days. The prospects of this thing getting greenlit right away for a sequel are just, they're not great at the moment. That doesn't mean that I won't take a chance on one. It's not a disaster by any means, but it's well short of, I think, where they hope to be. So my advice would be to not hold your breath on a sequel. And I do understand why narratively that might piss some people off. So keep that in mind, and hopefully I can share more on the movie next week on the show. What do we got next, dude? Oh,
Uh,
I hope you enjoy, Sham.
Next up, we have You Can't Kill the Boogeyman.
You Can't Kill the Boogeyman, the ongoing Halloween saga, 13 movies and counting by Wayne Byrne. Mr. Byrne and his publishers were kind enough to hook me up with a copy of this early, and I've gone through a chunk of it, and it's, it's a good read. It's not just Taking Shape. It's definitely written in a different way than Taking Shape. If you hold a gun to my head, and I've seen a lot of people across various Halloween groups doing this and on various YouTube channels, well, it's just a lesser Taking Shape, or I would take Taking Shape over this. And these are from people that haven't even fucking read the material yet. I will say I would take Taking Shape 1 and 2 over this, but I would also take Taking Shape 1 and 2 over any piece of Halloween literature ever written. So I don't think that's a fair comparable. It's not fair to Wayne. It's not fair to the publishers. Um, I think this is worth picking up. I truly do. It's some insight from a film historian, right? Some insight on the movies through the different eras, all the way up to some of the stuff that was going on with Blumhouse. And, like I said, 13 movies and counting. It's not just a tagline, there's something to that. So I would say if you're a Halloween fan and you don't get this, I get it. But if you have the extra budget to do it, it should go right up in there in your Halloween collection. We're going to have Wayne on. We don't have a date lockdown yet. That's not his fault. That's my fault. Um, Scheduling is not easy right now between kids and stuff going on. But we are going to have Wayne on. We live in a wildly different time zone than Wayne. So scheduling the interview is not easy, but we're gonna have him on to promote the book, and we're hoping to actually do a unboxing video of the physical thing itself here in the near future. So be on the lookout for that. And if you're a Patreon subscriber and you're here the day that we do the show with Wayne, you'll be invited to ask any questions you want, and anyone else who's not a Patreon subscriber can feel free to super chat and ask Wayne whatever you want. I'm sure we'll take some normal questions too, but we'll be limited with time and what we're able to do, much like we are when we have Dustin McNeil or someone else on, a guy like Daniel Farrens in the past, etc.
All right. Next topic in the notes, you have an approach that Halloween should consider for the sake of their future.
So look, we just spoke about I Know What You Did Last Summer and its results at the box office. if a new Halloween movie came out next year, more likely 2028, I don't think you're looking at box office results anywhere close to 2018 kills or frankly even ends. I just it's hard to recapture what they did there, whether you like how it played out on screen or not. It's still hard to capture the public eye. As much as I don't like Jamie Lee Curtis, they used her as a marketing train. They rode her to the finish line, and they made a lot of money off those three movies, a lot of money. And one of the ways, a key horror sequel component to being able to turn a profit is you lower production costs. You shoot in places with tax breaks, etc. Um, I think that the best approach you can do, because I don't know about you, man. I don't see whether it's a series next or the movie next. Depends on who you talk to and who you listen to, and I don't see them getting like A level talent and possibly not even B level talent for this. So you're going to be looking for some solid C plus level talent. You're going to have to cast well across the board. Um, and for me, you can't present much like we were just talking about with Crystal Lake as well. This cannot be something that you've done before. This cannot be okay. Well, here's a different take on Halloween 4 or Halloween 2 or Halloween 5 or any of the Halloweens. You need to present this in a way that is tangibly different than what you've done in the past, still feels like Halloween, but has the ability to rope people in. And my opinion is they should go back to what their original idea to Halloween H2O was. They need to go back and make this about finding Michael, about figuring out why he's doing what he's doing. And I don't mean through the lens of Laurie Strode or Jamie Lloyd. I mean through the lens of a couple of driven detectives who have, their own families on the line and put themselves on the line and their loved ones when they, put themselves out there publicly. Have them almost be obsessed the way, at least one of them be obsessed the way Loomis was in those earlier movies. Approach it from a almost like a crime TV perspective. I can't remember the name of the show, but like the one that had Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey in it.
True Detective.
So yeah, approach it. I get it. That's an HBO show. Those are lofty expectations, but you can still do the show in that style. You don't need to see Michael all the time. You can mix in another killer in there to throw them off the scent. But you should absolutely approach this from a different direction so that whether this is a movie and or a TV series, you can go, this is something different. This is why you should watch. Because the odds of them pulling in anyone not named Jamie Lee Curtis, and for the love of God, please no, I don't see them getting A or B plus level talent, dude. So a different approach is needed. And I like the idea of approaching it from a true detective, just a crime side of things, but obviously with heavy horror elements. Seven would be another one too, obviously with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Have that kind of approach to it.
Yeah, you need something original. That's the most important thing. Because you're right, you're not going to attract the high level talent that you know want. You're not going to get the guys on the wish list. You're going to get the people that are looking for an opportunity to make themselves, and you might get lucky and get someone on the come up. But it's not going to be you know a star. And if that's your expectations, then just you know I'm sorry for you, but you're not going to get that. Or nothing close to it.
I know early on, and I mean the early days when the people at Miramax were talking about this, a name that we were told that they were talking to was Sydney Sweeney, who would have been a get for them for sure because her her star's definitely on the rise. But dare I say now, um, I I think anyways that she's probably priced herself out of their bracket in her popularity rise in the last year and a half, and in terms of availability as well.
considerably. Um, there's no chance, none whatsoever of that happening. Um, yeah, not a single, not a snowball's chance in hell. That's for sure.
What do we got next, dude?
All right, next up we got the trailer that dropped on us today for the Hellraiser game, adult graphic novel. I don't know what we're calling this yet. Um, it's I watched it. Um, it's a game I think I'm gonna play eventually, maybe, because it doesn't seem like it's gonna be that expensive. Um, but I can guarantee you right now, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that this thing is getting streamed anywhere by anyone. Um, which is an interesting commitment when in the first 10 seconds of your trailer, the thing staring at your face is a pair of headlights. And I don't mean the front of a car.
Any more on that or no?
I, I just, it's. The trailer didn't show enough to me to get me excited. Like, from a gameplay standpoint, 90% of it was cinematic. So I don't even know, stylistically what kind of game it is in and of itself. Just that it, like, visually looked great. If the entire thing was, in engine, even better. It's piqued my interest for both good and bad.
So this is such a weird one to tackle because if you're looking on the graphic on our screen, it really does apply to all this. And you might be sitting there looking at that Star Wars graphic and going, how the fuck does that have anything to do with Star Wars? Well, we'll tell you. We'll get to it. Um, I did not know this was coming. Not a whisper, not a hint. And I guess the only hint that I would have got, I never would have connected the two, is that I knew the developer, who we won't mention quite yet, was working on something other than another project that we're going to talk about. Um, I think that this looks really good for what it is. I have no doubt that they didn't have full AAA money for this. Um, and they're going to give people a new story experience. They're going to give people Clive Barker back with Hellraiser, which is a big, big, big win for a lot of people. And, the gameplay didn't look terrible. I don't think it looked great. I think it looked solid. Now, there's a big difference between gameplay looking solid and gameplay playing solid. And we won't really know what this is all going to be until we come to it. But there was enough of like, I'm not a big Hellraiser guy, but I love movies that mind fuck you a bit. You know, they might not be, the fabulous threesomes the guy above me is used to having, but or wanting, but the the mindfuck movies, Hellraiser, Hush is a little bit of one. Obviously, The Shining, Doctor Sleep, so many movies like that um, really appeal to a different kind of genre in a way. Um, I I think this is good, man. Now, I think if people keep expectations in check and don't think it's going to be the greatest thing ever, then I think it can be good. But if they start building it up to be something that it's not, then I don't know. But I can tell you that cinematically, anyways, the cutscenes in this look fantastic. Like they look really, really good. What's a bummer is this is essentially what all Halloween fans are asking for in a Halloween game, and they're not going to get it. They're going to get another take on an asymmetrical horror game that's only single player options are going to be rooted in um, essentially challenges. How fast can you kill these people? How long can you survive against this Michael in this space? Stuff like that. Instead, the Hellraiser fans are getting a pretty damn good game. And dare I say, that last Hellraiser movie that came out, that wasn't bad. I thought that was a decent movie. So, you know, Hellraiser's been eating good lately, quietly though. Like it's not out there and in your face, and people aren't talking about it a bunch. But from a quality perspective, I think this is good, and I'm bummed for Halloween fans though because it's what they want and what they're not getting. Now you might have remembered off the top I mentioned this has something to do with Star Wars as well. Um, the developer, Johnny, do you know who the developer is?
Well, I watched the trailer, so yes.
Yeah, okay. So why don't you tell people who the developer is?
Why, it is Boss Team Games and Saber.
Now, isn't that quite the pair? Boss Team Games, who's reportedly no longer doing Halloween, and Saber Interactive, who's in charge of the biggest Star Wars game project there is, which has been in development hell for who knows how long, in the Knights of the Old Republic remake. What a weird, twisted contraption this is. I didn't have this on our bingo card tonight, dude, to be discussing how Hellraiser connects to Halloween and Star Wars, but here we are nonetheless. And this was the last ad to our show notes, too, as well. So um, I think the fact it looks good cinematically bodes well for the Knights of the Old Republic remake because one of the things that they were tasked on doing is there's not a ton of cinematics in Knights of the Old Republic. You get a lot of dialogue, but it's a lot of just showing your character on screen and then another character and then another character. The cinematics usually come in the Revan and Bastila vision sequences when you're arriving at a planet for the first time. If your character alone's having a force vision, and that's really it in the first game. There's a few more in the second game, and they're obviously a lot of trailer cinematics for the Old Republic game. But they were tasked with you need to make this game with cinematics as well, which is hard to do in a game that changes storyline so damn much, depending on the choices that you make. So at least visually, dude, I'm a little more hopeful for Knights of the Old Republic. That doesn't mean that I think we're ever going to see it. I'm simply saying that I'm more hopeful today than I was yesterday.
I I don't know. Um, you know, I guess it's going to come down to what it looks like in the end. Um, because then I just double checked this with the trailer. It doesn't say that the footage, even the gameplay footage, is captured in engine, and that's important. Because that is sort of the testament to quality of what it actually looks like, especially in the gaming industry. If you don't have the footage captured on, you know, blank platform, you just sort of assume that it's not what it is. It's just worked up. It's more touched up. It's more, I don't want to say cinematic because it's clear that some of it is gameplay footage or some form of gameplay footage. Um, it just, I don't know. I don't know, how it both. There are so many question marks, both in, the production of this and the, producing of this. And obviously, this isn't something they've just thrown together on a whim. Um, so it's it's just going to come down to, again, things like budget, things like time, um, and effort. Is another thing that's most
Was there a
important.
release date attached?
No,
Because
not.
nowadays games don't like to start really pumping the advertising wheels to the last half a year or so. And I'd be curious to see if that's the case here, or if they're trying to just get an early start on things.
I don't know. I mean, they made a point of saying this was the announcement trailer, and it did not include any of that information other than platform. Um, so I don't know. It's I'll withhold my thoughts like that until the end of the process. Once we see sort of more of how the work was distributed, who did what and where and how. We know the two studios involved, but we don't know the distribution of labor and who actually worked on what. So I think that's going to be important, and how much of this Saber has done sort of in the post uh, chaos of their studio that they've gone through in the last few years, with the Endeavor buyout to the Endeavor sale to whatever chaos and calamity is going on now. So I don't know. It's interesting. It's intriguing. It was not something I had on my bingo card, that's for certain. And when I watched it, it was not in any way what I expected. I did not expect them to lean so far into uh, the S&M element of Hellraiser, which is very prevalent, especially in the older films. Um, so I don't know. It's interesting. And obviously having Clive Barker is a huge deal. There's no question about that. Um, so I don't know. It's gonna be one of those. I've got eyes on it. It's gonna come down to the most important factors for a video game: price and playability. And neither of those are questions that we have answers to yet. So it's something that you know gets added to the Steam wish list, because it's probably the best way to keep tabs on it in the near future. But yeah, I'm watching. I'm intrigued, and we'll see what comes of it. You know.
All right, I'm going to take the floor here for a second and talk about a couple of tough things here. First off, our thoughts and condolences go out to the family of Ozzy Osbourne. The rock legend died. Uh, Either was it? I guess it's being listed as today, this morning, perhaps last night, but he has passed away, and not all that long after his big concert thing that he put on that had Black Sabbath there, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and so many others. Um, so yeah, our thoughts go out to him and his family during this time. Do you have a favorite Ozzy or Black Sabbath song? And yeah, just one. No, not 10, one.
It's one. I can't pick one.
Well, I'll pick one. I'm going with Paranoid. War Pigs is good, but I'm going with Paranoid. Um, Also, a little closer to home for us, a friend of ours, friend of Johnny and I's, for 2 decades now, basically, went in for a operation on his neck, and something went horribly wrong during the operation, and he basically lost all feeling in his body from chest down, and well, small, tiny bits of sensation have come back. He's already been warned that this might be something he has to live with for the rest of his life. Obviously, that's not what he was going or expecting going in, and sadly, these things do happen in the medical field. And we just want to say, Chris, that we love you, buddy. And I know we usually joke around in very inappropriate ways that would not be appropriate for this show, despite some of the content we cover. But honestly, we love you. We're thinking of you and your family, and just hang in there, brother. So if anyone wants to just send out well wishes or thoughts or prayers or whatever it is you believe in, I'm sure Chris and his family could use all the strength they could muster at this point in time. Alrighty, move us on, dude.
Well, that is going to do it for the horror segment of the show. So let's take that off and put on your favorite superhero mask. It's time to talk movies and TVs. Obviously, this week, the multiple choice question is: are you going to see Fantastic Four? Yes or no?
I'd like to, but I don't think it's in the cards, unfortunately. Might have to be one of those things that I see via nefarious means.
So let's move us into the first topic, and that is the direction the MCU is going, and whether or not there are missteps and warning signs to upcoming uh, chaos abounding.
Well, I'd love to sit here and say that everything looks great. I just don't know if it does, man. I think Kevin Feige's saying all the right things that, it became a priority at Disney, and maybe not the right things for his job security, but uh, um, the right things that fans probably want to hear is that it became more of a priority at Disney of putting out quantity over quality. And I think that's definitely shown more often than not. Um, I don't know if you've had the chance to see Thunderbolts yet. Thunderbolts was a breath of fresh air for me. I loved it. And I don't know many people who didn't love Deadpool and Wolverine. So there's a couple of wins right there. I didn't really care for Captain America, but I did like it more than Superman. But I don't know if that's saying much. Um, what concerns me is this. Obviously, I have a ton of excitement about the new Spider-Man movie that's slated to come out next year. We've talked about quite a bit on the channel over the last several weeks. You give me Tom Holland, and you give me the one true Punisher nowadays, anyway, John Bernthal. And for me, I'm absolutely giddy about it. But at the same time, you hear stuff like, well, Avengers Doomsday is well into filming, and they just brought in Michael Waldron to work on the script. Let me repeat, Avengers Doomsday is well into filming, and they just brought in Michael Waldron to work on the script. Now, there are things where, you get. There are times where the script is being worked on all through the production of a movie. It's not advised. There's always changes from the script, but the fact that you're just now bringing in a name of Waldron's caliber and you're in the middle of filming tells me all I need to know. And all I need to know is they're doing this by the seat of their pants. And that worries me, man. I'm not saying they can't turn it around into be a good movie, but there's just so many moving pieces in these next two Avengers movies that you're bringing in a guy this late. You made an announcement of a release date and then changed it a few months later because you realized you weren't going to hit it. Like, is it time to maybe pump the brakes on all of this? Obviously, it'll cost even more money to do that, and just say, "What are we doing? Let's take some time to get this right." Because at the moment, I'm pretty concerned, just given the recent track record not being all that great.
I don't know. I think uh, it's tough for me to say, because while yes, they are bringing in a Waldron this late in the process is, I don't want to say concerning, but it does definitely raise questions that we're not inherently going to get the answers to until well after, and I think to a certain degree, I think a collaborative film of this nature, something with this many moving pieces, does sort of require some degrees of constant rewriting. Um, and I think in a thing like this, like a superhero movie like this, you have your main points, you have your bullet points, you have your scripts, but you have your events that are set in stone. They're the unchangeables, but a lot of the stuff around it can be felt and changed. And if you come across characters like, with what we're presuming this is going to be, sort of like the Avengers movies of old, where you have the sort of mishmash teams doing mishmash things, which is something we got an idea of from the first batch of set photos that started coming out um, not too long ago. Having a crew of a mishmash of characters in a presumptively the Fantastic Four ship. Um, so when you're doing things like that, I think you're going to run into things like chemistry. And if you find characters that don't gel together, you need to make changes. When you find characters that do gel together, that ends up forcing changes. So I think, personally, having a Walder there, I think is, I don't want to say to me something I expect, because it is something I expect. I expect a writer to be there to keep things going straight, which is something that the Avengers movies have always sort of done. Like if you go back to the beginning, you had writer director. Um, and if you look forward at the different ones after that, you sort of had that. You had your writer and your directors there. Because it was a collaborative group effort. So it doesn't really concern me all that much, because you know it, I think the bigger concerns for me were sort of the mid-phase pivots, going from Kang to Doctor Doom, and all of that entailed. And now they're trying to say that, well, that was always the plan. But
Yeah, I
I
saw that too. I had a chuckle over it.
I don't inherently buy it in the way that they intended. Like, do I believe that there was always a plan that RDJ was going to play a Doctor Doom variant in this, and that was sort of going to end up taking over the film in a sort of direction? Like, I could believe that. I could believe that he was
I
always
believe
sort of,
they had a mission statement to always bring the
yeah.
actor back in some shape, way, or form.
Like, I can believe that the plan would have seen, in the first movie of the Avengers, duology, having Doom interject himself and take over and eliminate the Kangs. Yeah, absolutely, I can buy that. That's not a hard sell for me. It really isn't. Because of understanding the character of Doctor Doom, and understanding his place in in the Marvel universe. You know, he is one of the most important, one of the most controlling. He's one of the few characters that can make it all about him when it wasn't about him in a way that benefits the story. So it's it's going to be interesting to me to see how we get there. Like there has obviously been a lot more going on in this phase where things don't seem to be gelling and pushing forward in that unidirectional way that like the first few phases of the MCU had, because it did start getting more bulky and weighed down, and there were projects pushed that shouldn't have been pushed, there were things done that shouldn't necessarily have been done. You change TV series into movies and movies into TV series, and it takes a special project to move in either of those directions. You're either a movie or you're a TV show, and it is in part we've talked about it before. It is one of the biggest fears for Mandalorian and Grogu is that it was a season of a TV show that they're now co-opting into a film, and it's worrisome. But to me, it's more like a I go into these superhero movies more for the fun. Like I'm not expecting moving emotional storytelling. I'm not expecting that sort of thing. I want relatively comic accurate stories, things that feel like they fit in the comic books, characters that feel like they fit in the comic books. I want a little bit of that humor, I want a little bit of that serious. I just want good performances. I don't go in for like it's the thing that people like talk about. Superhero movies get short shrift in like best movie cat. Like I'm not going to a superhero movie expecting to see an epic. I'm just not, like, not the kind of epic I'm referring to. Like if a superhero movie is ever nominated for best picture, I think it has to be like a Dark Knight. That's the only
Well, for
superhero
sure,
movie.
you get Dark Knight. I mean, you might not like it, but movies like The Dark Knight Rises, Logan, movies that have that kind of aura around them that are set in more of a realistic setting, if you will. Um, because there's still a bias against comic book movies. There's still a bias against Star Wars projects. Look what just happened with Andor, right? So, like, um, I do agree with that. You have to be a very specific type of film from one hell of a filmmaker with one hell of a cast and story to pull off the getting nominated for an Academy Award.
And 90% of them aren't that. Like it's like when you go see the new Mission Impossible movie, are you expecting something that's going to be nominated for Best Picture? No, you're going to see what
Oh, I
new crazy
disagree.
stunt Tom Cruise has cooked up.
I would have said that about the earlier Mission Impossible movies. I haven't seen the last one, but the previous three or four, those are movies that could easily be up there for Best Picture because he's surrounded with a bunch of fantastic actors. And I'm not saying the guy can't act himself. I think Tom Cruise can act. People might not like him, but I think he can act. Um,
I tapped out on Mission Impossible 2.
oh well, you've missed the best ones in the franchise then, because they're probably honestly the two worst ones in the franchise. So, and that doesn't mean they're bad. I just think this franchise, well, two might be better than three, but after three, it's clear they went in a far different direction. Um, yeah, we'll have to see what happens with the MCU. Apologies, I got to sort of rush through the end of the show here because there's some stuff happening at home. But let's get to our next topic, dude.
Well, our next topic is the Harry Potter series. Filming has started on that. We've seen the start of set photos leaking their way out. We saw one of Hagrid at, I believe, King's Cross. Um,
All I seen was five guys at McDonald's. So,
Well, there was the one
Uh,
you sent. That was Hagrid at.
yeah,
I assume.
there's several photos in that area. There's one of Harry as well, and some other characters, and I'm quite surprised just how public the filming is of this. I'm curious to see what the look is going to be post editing.
I'm
Um,
happy for that, at least for these parts of it, because these parts are very in the real world. It does lead me to believe that we are once again changing the timeline, which inherently I don't hate. Because it is far easier to film as a modern day and not a period piece. Because if you've read the books, you know that they take place in the early '90s. They took place 10 years before the books were published. Easy to do
mhm.
in books, not so easy to do in film and television. So sort of bringing those into the modern day, I'm okay with that. I don't hate that
Save a bit of
inherently.
money.
Exactly. Like I don't mind seeing Hagrid in King's Cross, because that'd be a part of the wizarding world. You'd see things like that and you'd kind of question your sanity and be like, is that what I'm supposed to see? You know, um, like Dustin in the chat said, you love through keeping the Voldemort casting a secret. Yeah, me too. I am hugely a fan of that. It is important. It is important that they cast someone with the gravitas for the character. If the name that is sort of at the forefront of rumors turns out to be who it is, yes, please sign me up for that. Inject it directly into my veins. Um, because he was one of the guys at the top of my want wish list when this project was announced all those years ago. Um, I obviously mean Killian Murphy, who is reportedly now the front runner for that role. And if that's the case, fuck yeah!
So, what's interesting about the to back things up just a second? I'm not sure it's not going to be in the 90s because I specifically remember seeing an article where they're having 90s vehicles delivered on set. They spent some money to bring them in. So I don't know what they're going to do about the five guys in the McDonald's that are clear as day in the background there. Maybe they edit them out for other things, but there's absolutely been confirmed articles of them having 90s made vehicles over there brought onto set. So, I mean, you can do all sorts of things with digital editing these days. So I wouldn't
True.
rule out that it's not the 90s yet. You're going to spend that kind of money.
It, it,
Why don't you go build your own? Why don't you build your own street?
it, it
And by
is
that,
it is
I don't
something
mean a
that,
real street, but like
well, I think they will.
similar to
It's
what they
called
did for
Diagon
Game of
Alley.
Thrones.
Um, they will. That's Diagon Alley. They're not going to do that for places we only see for 10 or 15 seconds, like your King's Cross station, and that sort of above ground stuff. They're going to focus on that. But I think you're right. We've this is inherently a discussion we've had in relation to Halloween. It is much easier to do an 80s 90s flashback than it is to go back to the 70s and 80s, because things now aren't all that inherently different than they were 20, 30 years ago, compared to going back even 40 years ago. So passing it off for the early 90s, yeah, sure, no, you absolutely could do that. It's really not that difficult. The only things you don't really have then that you have now are like the digital boards and things like that. Everything else is pretty close to the same.
Yeah, I would, especially over there, right? Like it's much different than walking down the street here in
Especially that part of England.
Toronto or Houston, Texas, or New
Yeah,
York City or whatever. Um, I would just advise people to be cautious before assuming too much by seeing photos. 'Cause it's clear they're very much filming out and about in public, um, but clearly they have some trickery up their sleeves. I'm looking forward to it though, and I hope Killian Murphy does happen. That would be fantastic. It was interesting to note that apparently Voldemort is going to be in quite a bit of season one. There's conflicting information right now on whether it's 6 episodes or 8 episodes. I hope it's eight because an unabridged audiobook's about 9 hours for the first book and 9 hours for the second book. I don't want to lose 3 hours of content on a TV show. The whole point of doing the TV show, and you know damn well they're going to have their own original scene snuck in there too. It always happens. Um, is to get more of the story. The second you start cutting this thing down from what we thought was 10 episodes to 8 episodes to possibly 6 episodes, and you're going to lose some of that. You just will. It's what happens. So I'm hoping it's 8 episodes, but regardless, I'm
I
excited
think
for it, and I'm excited. I was excited to see that they are upscaling Hagrid after your little rant.
yeah, but I mean that was just more of a a concern that I hope this isn't the final production, which it appears that is absolutely not even close to. So I'm for that. The photo you sent in the group was one of him just out and about, and I believe it was King's Cross Station, where you can you get the feel that he is of a that he's a giant like he's supposed to be. We know that Hagrid is half giant in the books, so I'm for that. I think 6 to 8 can be that happy sweet spot for this, because I think a lot of you were talking about the length of the audiobooks, and that is a a good comparison for length, but I think when you go from even book to audiobook to film and television, a lot of that description is seen, so it's not necessary. Like, you don't have to describe characters walking across a thing to have a conversation. You know what I mean? So it like cuts the narrative framework of certain scenes in half. You don't have to describe the actions; you show them while doing the conversation. So cutting out a lot of that, I think, does get you closer to the 6 to 8 episode length that would. I think 8 even allows for more content to be added.
Which
We'll have to wait and
they're
see.
HBO's.
Oh, to
It's
some degree,
HBO.
yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be like, well, what if we did this? He did that. We already know if Voldemort's gonna be in this more than what we thought, according to what you and Randy were saying last
He
week
is
or
a
the
lot
week
more
before.
present in the book than he is in the movie.
Okay, well, either way, I'm excited, but it does sound like this thing might not come out till 2027 now. Originally, it was 2026. We'll see. Await official word still, but it sounds like they're filming seasons 1 and 2 back to back.
Which, to me, I said this. I can't remember if I said this on the show or in the group chat or something. I'm okay with that as long as the filming is done in lockstep right now. You know, I need the characters to, I need the golden trio to look like the appropriate age they're supposed to be. That's the most important
They're
thing.
definitely going to have to let them age up. So my guess is
Not
we
to the same
might not be.
degree.
Well, the fact is they're very young right now, right? So if they're filming season 1 and 2 at the same time, they could release them in back to back years. That would be the hope. You would think that would be the whole purpose of doing back to back seasons, is to give yourself a little extra time in the editing bay for season 2 to have it ready for a year after season 1. But like these guys are going to be, I'm guessing, a year and a half to 2 years away from filming before coming back.
We'll have to, wait and see how it ends up going. I hope it's, less than that. But, if you kind of go, certain films lend themselves to blocks. The first two, obviously, very easily can be filmed sort of back to back. Because, if we're being honest, the first two books are very light in intensity and action, location work, especially. I'd say the two books are pretty much confined to less than 2 dozen major locations between the first two books. Um, so we'll have to wait and see. All right, let's move forward. Let's jump ahead to the final topic of the evening. So we're going to take off our superhero mask. We're going to put on our Star Wars mask, and it's a simple question. We only have one real time. We do have your multiple choice question. What's your favorite N64 Star Wars game? Rogue Squadron, Shadows of the Empire, Episode 1 Racer, or Battle for Naboo? Or did we forget something? And is it another? It was N64 Star Wars game. What's your favorite? So we've only got one topic for this evening's conversation, and that's this. Ahsoka Season 2 is rolling. What does it need to do to be successful? It's a relatively simple question, but what's your answer?
We mean from also like a creative standpoint, not on what kind of numbers it needs to do
Yeah,
on it. And for me, you have the story's not divided, right? Like in the Republic, you have Thrawn and whatever he's up to, and whatever he fears is coming. And then you have the Republic now with Ezra. So you have them sort of pitting off against one another. And will that fear show up by the end of the season to lay the groundwork for the movie? And then, off in the great unknown or whatever, in another galaxy, you have Ahsoka and Sabine and, Force Ghost Anakin chilling on vacation.
okay, Bailey.
Um, and, for sure, you got Balin and his apprentice, who's kind of like no longer his apprentice anymore. We know there's massive connections to Mortis. To me, I think for your casual fan, you make sure you tell a good, intriguing story with the New Republic and Thrawn, but also show what Thrawn's capable of strategically, because we did not get to see that in season one at all, really. Um, so that needs to be on display. But then for the Mortis stuff that involves Ahsoka and Sabine and Balin and Anakin and possibly even Obi-Wan, I think you go real inside baseball with that shit, and you just have a ton of fun and tell a bunch of deep lore that you'll probably never get the opportunity to tell in a movie. That's how I would approach it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right on that. You did leave the story in such drastically different places. It sort of flipped from where you started, um, which I think is a good thing. Um, I want to see those characters, like we sort of we talk about rebels, but like I want to see those things. I want to see I want to see Ezra's reaction to Kanan's son. I want to see him finding that, and to a certain degree sort of finding out he has a quote unquote brother, as it were, and eh, establishing a relationship there, being that we did establish him as a force sensitive in the first season, and how that affects that relationship going forward. I want to see some of that. How does Thrawn and his appearance affect the machine that is the New Republic and its reluctance to do anything. um I want to see all of those things presently in the galaxy we know, but to me it's the galaxy far, far away that is the most interesting. um and that's because if ever there was a time for someone to dig into the machine, the underbelly of Star Wars, it's Dave. There's no question about that. He is the most qualified to dig into what makes Star Wars Star Wars. He's the most qualified to dig into the lore. Um, and I think Mortis, the Mortis gods is the most interesting pathway to that, because it has always, the Mortis gods has always been such a, I don't want to say, you know, point of contention with the Star Wars fan base, but it has been to a degree. What they are, what their significance to Star Wars is, what they sort of mean to Star Wars, and the balance of the Force, and how important is it, and does this affect that? It just, I want to dig in. Like you said, I want that particular part of this to be as inside baseball as it can, while still being relatable to the outside world. I don't want to get lost in the sauce of inside baseball, and have it blow up in our faces, which is a genuine risk. I want there to be enough inside baseball that, people like us who have been at this for a long time get their bone, get that piece of meat that we've been teased with, that's gives us something to chew on, something to discuss, something to break down, something to pontificate on and think about and feel and have those emotions. And all of that while still allowing, average Joe fans to come on board, or who came on board in the first season, and give them enough to feel occupied and present, while giving us that, that peek behind the curtain, that depth, that thing that we want so much, which is answers to broader questions. And they asked a lot of questions and opened a lot of doors in that first season that, going in, we didn't inherently expect. Like, if either one of us had have predicted, yeah, the last thing we're going to see is the Mortis gods, I'm, I can't speak for you, but I'd have thought you were full of shit.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in there and say I don't know if Dustin means it in this way, but he says season one was so inside baseball that if you bring in Mortis, it's going to lose some people. But hey, fans will still love it. I don't know if Dustin didn't see the end of season one, but my friend,
It's the
they
last thing
already
you saw.
did. They already did. That was the big kabang at the end of season one. It's not if, it's 100% happening. Yeah, it's definitely not an if. It's absolutely the direction they're going. And with all due respect to the average Joe, they can go fuck themselves. They got the Mandalorian and Grogu. They got the Acolyte. They've got fucking Book of Boba Fett and a bunch of other shit that's come out. This is our shit. This is our inside baseball show. This is where we get to dive into the forest lore and fantasy like we don't get to in the other shows. I loved Andor, but obviously we didn't get any of that in Andor. Um, this show is for the diehard Star Wars fan, in my opinion. And to be frank, the numbers for Ahsoka season one did not warrant a continuation. They made a call to continue this show because it's going to lead into the Filoni movie, which is a loose sequel to Mandalorian Grogu, which comes out next year. But we'll see what all happens. But from everything I can tell, not only is Ewan McGregor expected to be in this show as Obi-Wan Kenobi, but Hayden Christensen's filmed quite a bit this season on this show. So I think you're in for a heavier dose of Force Ghost slash World Between Worlds slash flashback Anakin. Like he just had to cancel convention appearances for the second time due to filming. So, um, you know, I can live if they decide to only go half, you know, put their toe halfway in with the inside baseball force lore stuff. The one thing that's an absolute must that they cannot fuck up is Thrawn.
Mm.
You cannot fuck up Thrawn. And whoever was doing the costumes in season one, I hope they lost their job. I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I really thought that's one area that the show lacked in season one. I thought the costumes were fucking downright terrible, especially when you put it hand in hand with even shows like Ahsoka, pardon me, Andor and the Acolyte. The costumes far better in those shows. But also
I
wanted
think
to
I
mention,
think that part, just to that, the costume. I think they lean too far into the, they've been in this other galaxy for so long that everything is, run down and looks crappy, that it came off looking bush league.
even Thrawn, like I'm looking at his suit right when we were first watching it, and it's the first thing we did with Randy on the channel, who's as Johnny mentioned off the top's under the weather right now. And I hated the look of the suit. I was just like, it looks so cheap. Like this shouldn't look like Thrawn went shopping at Temu. I know he's been gone for a while, but still.
There's no
Um,
universe where Grand Admiral Thrawn does not have like a full-on walk-in closet with like 1,000 uniforms, just
Agreed.
because his look is that important to him.
Yeah, 100%. And I hope that's something that gets corrected in the second season. But speaking of the first season, if you're wondering when we're going to do content on it, we will obviously cover it a little bit more we lead into the show next year. But I believe one of the big things we're going to be doing on Patreon coming up here in the near future is doing watch parties to Ahsoka season one again. That will all be exclusively on Patreon, or maybe we'll put like the first one up publicly on the channel, and the other seven on Patreon. while we did do reviews for this series back when it came out, we didn't all watch it together. It's something we had fun to do together doing with Andor, and I would expect that in the not too distant future. I've been itching to watch that show again anyway.
It is something, like you said, we'll come back around to. So,
Take us home.
all right, it is time for us to say good night. We hope you all enjoyed tonight's show. Um, for all of us here, we want to thank you guys, especially everyone over at patreon.com/the Mask of Fear, our sponsors. Big thanks to all you guys, Ryan, Jason, Jesse, and everyone else who sponsors over. For everyone else who's a patron over on patreon.com/Mask of Fear, we thank you guys. Like I said, every week without you guys, there is no us. So thank you to all of that. And you can, of course, join us out here every Tuesday night right here for the Mask of Fear live recording. Um, Anything else you want to plug tonight?
No, not really. Just hang around, and I don't know if Johnny and Randy will get more Patreon recording done tomorrow with Randy being under the weather, but we're going to cover a lot here in the coming weeks, and the Ahsoka thing's probably going to come to the forefront pretty quickly. I know we'll have a SummerSlam review out after it happens, and just stay tuned for the Tuesday show. We appreciate the support, obviously, and stay safe out there. And again, condolences to Ozzy and his family and friends and fans, and best wishes to our friend Chris, who's definitely in a battle for a way of life right now, and one that he didn't expect to be in. And we support you, brother. Stay strong.
And you can find me here, there, everywhere. All right, send us home.
That's going to do it for us tonight. Randy, get better soon. And we will see everybody on the next episode of The Mask of Fear.